बीए पार्ट सेकंड के विद्यार्थियों का स्वागत। आज के वीडियो में हम बात करेंगे ए ब्रीफ समरी ऑफ द स्टोरी डॉक्टर हेडगेर्स एक्सपेरिमेंट बाय नेथेनियल हॉथॉर्न। प्रिय विद्यार्थियों, इससे पहले के वीडियो में हमने बात की थी अबाउट द राइटर नेथेनियल हॉथॉर्न and a short introduction of this story, Dr. Heidegger's experiment. In today's video, we will discuss a short or a brief summary of this story. Nathaniel Hawthorne's story, Dr. Heidegger's experiment, is based on the study of human nature. It exposes that human nature is full of weaknesses and many of them are incurable. Every old person wants to show himself as young. Sex is an instinct which haunts every man. The story exposes these weaknesses of human nature, and these weaknesses the writer finds is incorrigible. The experiment made by Dr. Dr. Heidegger's is quite appropriate. Dr. Heidegger's invitation to his four friends. Dr. Heidegger was a strange man. He had some eccentricities which he wanted to satisfy. He had wonderful liquid, the effect of which he wanted to be observed. He needed some persons for this purpose to be experimented upon. Since the experiment was related to youth of persons, he wanted both male and female old person to be involved in his experiment. He invited four of his friends, of whom one was a lady. Dr. Heidegger has invited four elderly friends to visit him in his study. They are Mr. Melbourne, a merchant who lost his fortune in risky and foolish investment. Colonel Killigrew, a former officer who now suffers from gout and other pains and ailments after a lifetime of sinful pleasures. Mr. Gascoigne, who had been a corrupt politician in his youth but is presently merely obscure, and the widow Wickerly, who was a once great beauty and a former lover of to the three persons. Heidegger has called them to participate in an experiment. He himself was a man of both science and sovereignty, and his study is full of medical curiosities and a large spell book. He also keeps a portrait of the young lady who was his fiancée until one of his experimental medicines killed her the day before their wedding. Dr. Heidegger had a wonderful liquid which he thought could revive old persons and withered things to their youth and freshness. This liquid was the water from the fountain of youth. Dr. Heidegger had a beloved named Sylvia Ward. He wants to marry her, but he could not because she had died on her bridal eve. This lady had presented Dr. Heidegger a rose. He had placed the rose among the leaves of a voluminous book. The rose later was withered and dried up. Dr. Heidegger expected the rose to receive freshness. On a center table, he has an elaborate glass vase with four champagne glasses arranged around it. Dr. Heidegger produces a dried, pressed rose given to him by his late fiancée and put it into the vase, where it revivifies into a delicate, newly opened blossom. He explains the water is from the mythical fountain of youth that the Spanish explorers searched for but never found. An acquaintance of his discovered it and sent him some of the water. Dr. Hedge's friends are skeptical, believing this to be a trick, but Dr. Hedge explains he is inviting them to try it themselves. He himself is content to remain old and merely observe. However, before they drink, he urges them to drink about the mistakes of their youth and to be wiser and more virtuous the second time around. They all agree that it could not be otherwise and drink. Dr. Hedges wanted to observe the effect of the water of the fountain of youth upon the old persons. The four guests upon whom the wonderful water was to be experimented thought it to be one of the eccentricities of the doctor. But the doctor insisted that the wonderful water would revive youth to old person. He filled four champagne glasses with that wonderful liquid to be drunk by the four guests. But he asked them to make few general rules for their guidance before swallowing the drink. They would be virtuous and could act with wisdom when they became younger under the effect of the wondrous water. The four guests then drank of the water and put their glass on the table again. The wondrous water showed its effects, and soon there was cheerful glow on the faces of the four guests. Formerly they appeared corpse like, but then there was a rosy glow on their cheeks, and the time created wrinkles on their faces had disappeared. Widow felt herself a young woman. Seeing the effect of the liquid, the guest demanded more of that water. Dr. Heidegger asked them to keep patience as he was observing the effect. The champagne glasses were again filled with the wonderful water. The guest took those glasses and immediately swallowed the liquid. It had a magical effect. Their whole body systems were rejuvenated and the and had a magical effect. When the liquid was only passing through their throats, the guests also felt the magic power of the liquid. They felt the gush of the young life shooting through their veins. They were in the happy prime of their youth. Their body and soul became vigorous. They felt like newly created beings in a newly created universe. Their vigorous youth then made them overexcited. They laughed loudly at their old fashioned garment. All the guests were unruly in their behavior. They behaved irresponsibly. They pretended to show themselves strange. One of them tried to imitate the high dignity of Dr. Heidegger. They shouted and leaped about the room. The widow, with a mischievous merriment, went to the extent of asking Dr. Heidegger to dance with her. Dr. Heidegger resented to this unruly behavior of his guest. The girl widow was almost inflamed to madness. She flitted, but neither she did grant to or nor did she withhold her favors from the three guests. It made them to interchange threatening looks. They grappled furiously at each other's throats. Then they lost their youth and got back their old days. Thus, Dr. Heidegger's experiment, though successful, ended woefully. So, Dr. Heidegger has guessed and they return to their seats. In his hand, the renewed rose is fading again, though he says he loves it as much as it stays as in full bloom. His subjects are also reverting. They are horrified by their return to old age, particularly the widow who hides her wrinkling face and wails. Dr. Heidegger delivers the conclusion of his experiment that the water from the fountain of youth is dangerous and transitory, and their actions have shown it. It should not be meddled with his four subjects, having learned no such lessons, resolves to move to Florida and spend the rest of their lives drinking the intoxicated waters of the fountain of the youth. So, dear student, this was a brief summary of the story Dr. Heidegger's experiment. Hope you enjoyed this video.